Good morning. Hi, sunshine.
Good morning.
I've missed your face.
Hello.
How are you
I
today?
know. I missed you too.
How are you today?
I'm doing good.
You sure? Okay.
Doing good.
All right.
Yep.
Good. You just don't look your bright
I'm
chipper self.
here.
Yeah, you're here. That's a win for me for sure. You just don't look your bright chipper self. So I'm like, but we can talk about that later. But I'm glad to see you. Hi, Kim. Good morning. It's so funny when I see that family picture behind your head too, Cindy, because your boys look so young
I
in that
know.
picture. So I always, when I see it, I always think like, man,
Yeah. I
forget
I
his.
think I probably need a new headshot too.
That's okay. It's all good. I actually use the artificial intelligence to get myself a new headshot. I don't know if you've tried it or not, but I'll send you the link. You basically upload, you know, 5 or 6, 7, 8, however many you want pictures of yourself that you like. And it will spit out, I don't know, 100. Not all of them are good. I promise you that. Some of them, they don't know what to do with your hands, or they basically take your face and put it on another body. But
What?
I did get a really nice looking picture that I've actually been using. But I will share you guys the link for it if you're so inclined. I've actually, some of them turned out really great. I was like,
Yeah,
dang,
share it with me.
if only I'd looked this good. But I will share it with you when I grab the link. I'll post it in the group for you guys to try it out. But I think I paid like $12 or something, $14 maybe. And like I said, it gave me 100 pictures to choose from. It's just some of them I really liked, some I didn't, some I thought were weird. But if you are like me and you don't necessarily want to get in front of a camera, it may be an alternative that you might want to look into. So, or just go get in front of a camera, whichever makes you happy. But I thought it was worth a try. All right. We are
Yeah, I'll definitely
loading up
check
the,
into it.
yeah, you got it. We are loading up the room. Cindy, by the way, we are officially under contract on River Trail. The girl that the people for the Belmont law student ended up writing a ridiculous offer that she could not refuse. So we ended up withdrawing our counter offer to the first offer. And they're under contract. So thank you very much for hosting that open house so that they could come see it and buy it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
Yeah,
great news.
that's awesome. Thank you. Okay, this week we are on our second to last um, module here. This one is on working with investors. So if any of you have ever been curious about how do I get started working with investors, what do I need to know about working with investors, I am going to blow your mind with all of that today. Um, I have been working with investors for probably 20 years. Some of my very first clients were investors. What One of the things I love about investors, it's kind of a love-hate relationship, and I will warn you right now that that's what working with investors is going to be like. It's a love-hate thing. I love them because they typically act quickly. They typically know exactly what they want. Unlike your, normal families, sometimes they mull over things. Your investors are going to make some quicker decisions. They're going to move pretty quickly. And sometimes they buy multiple properties in a year. So they're a client that is not just buying a house for their family and then you don't hear from them again for 7 or 8 years. It's my investors sometimes buy multiple properties in a year, or they buy a couple properties each year, which can be very lucrative. But I will warn you, the hate part comes with they're a time suck. They 100% will eat up all of your time if you allow them to. They will run you all over town looking for the deal, because that's the one thing you need to know about working with investors. It is about the numbers and about the numbers only. Do the numbers work or don't they? We're going to talk about the different types of investors. I'm going to talk about I created a 10 top tips for working with investors that I'm going to share with you in just a second. And we're going to talk about what kind of information do you need to know to better serve investors. But I will tell you that a lot of times your investors, one of the things that I also hate about them, and I hate to use the word hate, but one of the things I very much dislike about working with investors is that often there is no loyalty with investors. You have to earn the loyalty. They will not be signing a buyer broker agreement with you typically, because they don't want to be nailed down to one agent. They want to have, multiple agents looking out for them, looking for properties. And so it is difficult sometimes to get loyalty from a new investor that you're working with. They are very hesitant and shy. But one of the things I will tell you is that you can get loyalty from that investor by bringing the projects to them. You have to be proactive with investors. You cannot wait for a property to come on the market, your investor to see it, and your investor's going to think, oh, I'm going to buy this house. You have to be very proactive. Typically, the deals are found for investors when you find off-market properties that are not on the market. By the time it's in the MLS, that margin that your investor needed is the commission, right? That's already added in, and it's the full market value. The price is higher. So your investors aren't going to love properties that are sitting in the MLS because typically they're going to be overpriced. The margins are going to be a little wider for them, which is not, that's where they make their money. So you want to be very careful about, when you are working with investors, your secret sauce is going to be, how can I find a property that is not on the market right now, that nobody else knows about, that is affordable for my investor, that they can get in, do the things they want to it, and get out of it. So just know you've got to be proactive. You can earn your investors' trust by bringing the deals to them. Every investor I've ever worked with, if I brought the project to them, they were loyal as hell to me. But, I call them, I kind of say that they'll sleep with anybody who bring them a project is who they will work with. So just remember, if you're going to earn their business, you've got to be looking for opportunities for them everywhere. Okay. So just know that. I did share in the chat with you a link, and Kim will tell me if it didn't go to the right place. She usually is the first one. But I shared with you a link, thank you, Kim, to my folder that has 2 documents in it. One is the notes for today, for the class, and the other one is your top 10 tips for working with investors. So I am going to go ahead and get to that screen. So what makes investors different is that, remember, they're not moving into the home. They don't care, about what the neighbors or the schools, unless the schools impact their investment. This is an investment opportunity for them. And so what matters to them is, how much money can I make off of this? What is the max rate of my return on this? So let's talk about the different types of investors that exist, first of all. The first one is a fix and flip. So these are going to be your typical flippers that will, their only intention is to get in and get out as quickly as possible. So a fix and flipper is going to they love the ugly ducklings. They love the ones that nobody else would even consider buying. Like my listing recently on Shauna Drive, that was a fix and flip, which basically it had carpet going up the walls. It had so much trash. It was a hoarder house. There was 3 dumpsters full of junk to get rid of. Those are your unicorns. Those are the ones you hope that you can find for your investors, because again, your normal Amy and Bill who watch HGTV, they can't see past the mess. They can't see past the ugliness to see what it could be. And that's the beautiful thing about investors, is that they're not emotionally attached to a project. They can see what they know based on their experience, what they can make a house turn into and what it can look like. And so typically they have a vision that our HGTVers don't. Okay. You have your buy and hold investors, and that basically means you're going to buy it. You're going to probably put a little bit of work into it, and then you're going to rent it out. And you're going to hold on to that property, probably for a minimum of 5 years. Some buy and hold people just try to hold on for 2, just because that's the, kind of sweet spot in some markets. But again, if they're not living in the property, they're probably going to need to hold it for a lot longer than 2 years. Then you have your wholesale investors. a lot of my investors buy their properties from wholesalers. And what a wholesaler does is they basically go out, and I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. They typically steal properties from sellers. And I say it that way because they 100% are trying to tell these sellers what their house is worth. They offer cash to these sellers who may be in a hardship, a financial hardship. They may be being inundated with county fines where they've broken code violations or their house is not in good repair, and they can just tell that the seller is probably very hungry for money. So a wholesaler will swoop in, offer the seller cash money with a quick close, and then the wholesaler will then turn around and try to find another investor to buy this house. They won't fix it up. They won't do any work on it. Their job is just the middleman between the previous seller and the new buyer. So a lot of my investors actually will buy properties from wholesalers because the wholesaler got it super cheap. Then the wholesaler marks up the property to sell it to the investor, and the wholesaler makes his money just holding on to the property in between the one person and the second buyer. In my experience, and I know this is a horrible thing, but in my experience, the wholesalers are like the scum of the earth. And I hate to say that, but if you knew that a property had more value and could have more value by fixing it up, or could have more potentially more value, then I think you are doing a disservice to that seller by taking the property for 100,000 when it's really worth 300. To me, that's shady. To me, that's slimy. Now, there are wholesalers who are the knights in shining armor because they rescue sellers from financial hardship, and that's their way out of the property. And I get that. But the wholesalers operate in a predatory kind of way. In my experience, they knock on doors. They actually will call codes on houses to inundate this seller with code violations so that then they're prime for wanting to sell, which I think is predatory. I think that is unfair to the seller. And so I don't love wholesalers, but they are a part of the investor group. Then you have your commercial real estate investors, and these are ones that focus primarily on commercial properties. They love office buildings. They love retail centers. They love apartment complexes. They love duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes. So you'll see this category is more focused on maybe in college towns, people who want to buy up whole apartment buildings, rent them out to college students, things like that. Your commercial real estate investors are going to be a lot more savvy typically than your regular investors. They're going to want to work with somebody who really understands commercial properties. They're going to want to work with somebody who really understands, what kind of needs that they may have if they're buying multi-unit properties. Okay. I want to talk very quickly about a 1031 exchange. Raise your hand if you've heard of a 1031 exchange, but maybe you don't know quite how it works or what it is, right? So a 1031 exchange is typically where you have bought some type of investment property and you're thinking of selling that property, but in order to keep and maintain the tax benefits that you have to buy a like kind property. So if you had a single family home that is a long-term rental and you want to sell that, but you don't want to pay capital gains, you don't want to pay all the tax implications for selling that property, you can protect that money by reinvesting it in a property that's very similar and another single family home. But you have a timeline to do it. There is a third party group that has to manage the 1031 to make sure that it's done properly. But you will hear a lot of times, if you are going to work with investors, you need to understand that there are going to be investors who are buying it using a 1031 exchange. And what that means is that you just have to comply with the rules and regulations of a 1031 exchange, and you have a timeline that you have to meet. So I have had investors that have had 2 weeks. I have to find another property that's similar to this duplex, and I only have 2 weeks to do it. And that's because they're under a time crunch to find a replacement property for this 1031 exchange. You're exchanging one property for another and safeguarding your investment, protecting your investment so that you don't have to pay, kind of shielding yourself from some taxes in that way. Does that make sense? There are tons of classes. If you want to know more, I'm going to tell you the GTS, which means Google that stuff, right? If you're not sure how 1031s work, you can Google it and learn everything and anything you want to know about it. There are classes all over the country on 1031 exchange. Most of your title companies probably will offer it. If you're going to be involved in a 1031 exchange, I would just advise you to at least take a class so that you understand what all is required and what all is involved in a 1031 exchange. But Google is your friend. I promise you can learn enough to be dangerous by Googling a 1031 exchange and what you need to know about it. All right. So the biggest thing for you as working with investors is how you evaluate a property. When I'm working with investors and I go in to give them kind of an analysis, whether if they are buying a property, then I want to give them kind of 3 different price ranges. One is going to be, are we just going to flip it? One is, are we going to hold it? I always have to know what my investor's goal is. What are they trying to do with it? Do they want to get in and out for the least amount of money? Do they want to improve square footage to maximize results? Can we add a bedroom? Can we add square footage? Can we add a bathroom? Can we, finish off the basement to add square footage? Like, there are some investors who are like, I just want to put lipstick on the pig, make a little bit of money and get out. And then there are others who are like, I know that I can make more money if I increase my square footage. So I'm okay with tearing down a wall, renovating a basement, whatever that is, because I know that's going to make me more money by adding square footage. And then you've got others that are like, I just want to hold, I want to build a portfolio and I want to buy and hold. You have to know what your client's goal is when you are evaluating these properties for them. And you may have to come in with a couple of different price ranges as your advice to them based on what their goal is. If I'm trying to get in and out, I might price it very differently than if I'm doing a, let's tear out this, let's build up the basement, let's increase, add a bedroom, add a bathroom. That might be a different valuation model that I would be using, right? Does that make sense? I hope so. Yeah. All right. Every single time that I work with investors, I have to run comps for them because typically if they buy it from a wholesaler, the comps are inflated. They will always give, wholesalers will always give your investors kind of like an AVM or an RVM, which is like that valuation model. And they will typically inflate those by at least 10 to 20%. So if they tell my client, if you bought this house and you renovated it, you could turn around and sell it for $550 or for $450. My investors always make me check the numbers behind the wholesalers because they're grossly inflated, right? And sometimes, if you're going off of that number and you're using that number to build your whole spreadsheet of fees and carrying costs and to evaluate the deal, you're already in the hole because you've used an inflated number of what the house could be worth, right? The other thing is when you're working with investors, especially if they're brand new, whatever their renovation costs are, add 20% or 10 or 15%. You've got to have a buffer because as you know, when you get into renovating a house, you find mold behind a house. You find the septic system has to be renovated. You will find all kinds of things that need to be done that you hadn't accounted for, you hadn't planned for. And so they need to have an extra cushion for their rehab budget or their renovation budget. You guys watch enough HGTV, I'm sure, to know. I don't know where they find these prices when they tell you, like beachfront bargain hunt renovation is one of my, we love this show. But the prices that they give you when they say, oh, we were able to renovate this whole house for $25,000, that's crap. Right? There's no way you're going to renovate an entire house for $25,000. I could barely do a primary bathroom for $25,000 these days. So just know that your investors, you need to ask more questions about how skilled are they in estimating what these renovations and rehabs cost. Where did they get their numbers from? And that's my advice to you is make sure that you've asked enough questions to help guide them. If this is a first-time investor, you want to make sure that they understand that they need a bigger cushion and that they may need to get some estimates from some people if they're not going to do their work themselves. That is another question that I often ask my investors is, Will you be doing the renovation work yourself or hiring a contractor? Do you know this contractor? Have you worked with them before? Do you know any of their subs? Because in investments, time is money. When you have to hire a contractor and their subs are on 5 other jobs and you can't even get to your project for 6 months, that's 6 months of carrying costs you need to allocate for, you need to plan for. So I'm always asking my investors, do you need a referral for subcontractors or for contractors? Will you be doing a lot of the work yourself? Saving money is doing a lot of the work yourself, but not everybody is handy. And I will promise you this, if you don't have experience renovating houses and you think you're just going to put lipstick on a pig, people will know the quality of your work when they come through. You know, I have several different investors that are night and day. I have one investor that his work is impeccable, that very little comes up on the inspection when they come back, that you can tell he takes his time and does great quality work. And then I have other investors that are cheap. And you can be cheap. That's great for you, but it shows that you're cheap and your houses look like they're cheap. And the people know that all you did was put lipstick on a pig, which means you can't ask high dollar. You can't ask the height of the market for cheap that looks cheap, right? So make sure that you're providing value to this investor by saying, what is your plan? Are you planning on renovating yourself? Are you hiring a contractor? What assistance can I provide to you in getting people that you know are going to do great quality work, that are affordable, that aren't going to bust their budget, right? I will always provide a rental analysis for my clients, especially if they're doing a long-term hold. I am always going to, and then the other thing that we did not talk about in the type of investors, there are also house hackers now. That's totally new. And house hacking means that basically you are using that property. It could be for short-term rental. It could be for mid-term rental. If you don't know what mid-term rental is, let me explain real quick. That is where you either have furnished corporate housing, you have furnished housing for maybe traveling nurses, or corporate or something like that. But you're basically using the mid-term rental. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. You're using the property in more than a short-term way, like not an Airbnb for a weekend or something like that. You're using it more for longer term, like more than 30 days typically. The beautiful thing about midterm rentals is that the rental rate is a lot higher than your normal. It's higher than your Airbnb, and it's higher typically than your monthly rental if you were doing a long-term rental. So I have a lot of investors right now that are looking for, I'm looking for something that I can rent to traveling. During COVID, we had a whole bunch of people buying for traveling nurses because we had more traveling nurses in the economy and in the marketplace needing a place to stay, and they need something furnished. They need something that's more than 30 days, but less than a year. But remember, you can get higher rental rates that way. I also have agents across the country that are buying investment properties themselves, furnishing them, and using those to rent to their clients when they have a lot of relocation business. They're using then that property to rent to people who are either building new construction and their house is not ready, or they are using it to like, do you want to try out this neighborhood to see if you like it before you buy in it? And they're renting it for 30, 60, 90 days at a time. Or while their people are still trying to figure out where they want to live, they're renting it on a higher than the Airbnb rate, and then higher than the monthly rate for a long-term rental as well. Does that make sense to everybody? Shake your head. Yes, there you go. All right. I always offer a referral for a property management company to my investors as well, because especially if they're holding it, if they're flipping it, you don't need that. But if they're holding it, and especially if they want to do Airbnb or midterm, there are management companies that can help them do that. And so I'm always going to work very closely. I would recommend that you interview some property management companies and figure out how they work. Get some references from their current clients. Don't just trust what's on their website. Get references from their current clients that use them for property management and see how well they've been able to work with them. How quickly do they get their rents paid? How great are they at handling problems as they come up? But you should have resources available for your investors if they do need property management, whether that's short-term, mid-term, or long-term. You've got companies that can help them with that, and establish a relationship with these companies. Okay. We talked about the wholesalers already. Establishing loyalty, I kind of talked about at the beginning. Remember, you can build loyalty with this investor by being the proactive agent that finds them the deal. You've got to find the property before your client does, right? And before other agents are pitching them different properties. So working with investors means that you cannot sit and wait for it to come on the MLS. You actually have to go out and seek the properties yourself and find them before they come on the market. I have done in the past what's called an investor professional services fee program. What that means is that, remember, I don't call it a commission. It's called a professional services fee. Remember, commission implies and indicates that you're probably overpaid. Commission indicates typically that somebody sold something and you get a percentage of that sale. I would like to differentiate myself from a salesperson. This is a professional service that I provide. And so therefore my fee that I collect is called a professional services fee, not a commission. But I do have a special program where if my investors buy more than one property a year from me, it may be 3 is my limit, then I will negotiate my fee with them on the sell side or on the purchase side, either way, just depending on what their goals are. If they're holding and I'm not going to see that listing come up for a while, I might cut it a little bit on the buy side, depending on how many properties they buy in a year. If they are flipping properties and they're getting in and out, remember, I can make the same amount of money off of 4 deals than I can with 2 regular sellers. But remember, I have 4 deals. So that's 4, every listing I have should turn into 2 to 3 more listings. So the fact that they're buying 4 properties that year, they're going to renovate the property and they're going to flip it. I want to cut them a break on some of the listing side commission, the listing side fee, because I'm working more in volume. They're buying and selling more houses than the typical person who only buys 1 a year. But remember, it's your business. You get to operate your business however you like. My goal is to teach you to keep as much of your money as possible. But when you have somebody who's buying high volume, I typically have a program where I will negotiate my fee with them, if that makes sense to everybody. So there are 2 vocabulary terms that I need you to learn when it comes to working with investors. One is called a cap rate. The capitalization rate is a measure that basically it's the ratio between the annual rental income to its current market value. So how much is it appreciating each year, right? So most investors that I've worked with in the past, they love to see anywhere from 5 to 10% cap rate. 10% is really hard to find. 7.5 is a great cap rate. It means that, and I kind of wrote it out for you so that you can go back and visit it. It means that if your property value is $150,000, a 7.5% cap rate would mean you get a yearly return of $11,250. Remember, your investor is going to have a very robust spreadsheet probably. There's tons of free tools and resources out there. I'm going to show you a couple of sites that you can get some of these tools. But your investor is likely going to have already some type of program, some type of spreadsheet where they are calculating what their acquisition costs are. How much does it cost me to buy this property? How much money do I have to put into it in renovations? And how much do I have to put into it for holding the property until I'm ready to sell it or rent it or whatever? How many mortgage payments do I have to pay? The taxes, like the fees, all the things. So an investor is very hyper-focused on a cap rate because they want to know annually, what is this property going to make me? So when someone asks you, oh, well, what's the cap rate on this? I don't want you to freak out and go, I have no idea what they're talking about. I want you to understand what a cap rate is and how to calculate it. It's based on what is the yearly return on the property? How much are you going to be able to rent it for? Or how much are you going to be able to get out of it? Same thing with an IRR. An IRR is basically another term that you will hear. It's basically an internal rate of return, and it's estimating the value it generates during the time frame in which you own it. essentially kind of the appreciation rate. So how much is this property going to increase in value while I own it? Some of the IRR is impacted by the renovation that you do, right? If I'm adding square footage, if I am taking out the Formica countertops and putting in granite, I'm putting in stainless steel, I'm putting in hardwood floors, I'm adding a bedroom, I'm increasing the square footage. How does that impact my IRR, right? That IRR is going to be just another term that your investor is going to be very hyper aware of. Okay. So I just want you to know what these two words mean and then how to calculate them and what's a good rate and what's not a good rate. I think 20% IRR is a little high sometimes for right now, especially if you're finding a property that's on the market. An IRR of 20% is going to be hard. Okay. Unless they are increasing square footage, unless they are increasing, majorly increasing the value on the inside. Okay. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's talk about some things you need to look out for or watch out for. Number one is ethical considerations. We have, if nothing else, we have our reputation and our integrity. The reason I don't like wholesalers is because they prey on people who are in a desperate situation. They basically call the codes office and get people fined so that they are ripe to try to want to sell their house. I have watched wholesalers drive races out of a neighborhood so that they could benefit financially from it. I have watched unethical business practices of wholesalers, and that's not me. That is not the work I'm trying to engage in. That deal is not worth it to me to drive a family out of a neighborhood that has lived there for 60 years because they can't afford to stay there. They can't afford to pay the code violations. As a community, we need to roll up our sleeves and find them help. Who in the neighborhood can help them remove the junk cars, help them get rid of the things that are code violations. But we cannot allow these people to prey on the less fortunate people in the neighborhoods. We cannot allow these people to drive people out of fear, out of their neighborhood. If they want to sell, they want to sell. But we are not going to create an environment where we're forcing them to sell out of fear or forcing them to sell out of financial hardship. There are resources available to them. So number one, is the investor you're working with, are they predatory? Are they only care about the dollar at the end of the day? Those are not the kind of people I want to work with. Okay. I don't care how many houses they're buying. So you need to decide for yourself, is this someone I want to work with? The second thing is disclosure requirements. You need to make sure, remember, when your investor buys a property, they are required by the state, if they turn around to sell it, they're required by the state to fill out what's either known as a property condition disclosure or a property condition disclaimer. The disclaimer means, I bought this as an investment. I've never lived in it. I don't know what could be wrong with it. As an investor, you get to sign that because you've never lived in it. But as an investor who has torn that house down to the studs, you may know of some things that are wrong with the house that you didn't fix. And it is our responsibility to educate these investors, their legal obligation, that just because they are an investor and they haven't lived in it doesn't mean that they don't know of things that are wrong with the house that require disclosure. And no matter who you represent, remember, when you got a license, you agreed to tell people that you know of anything wrong with the house, that you must disclose it, regardless of who you represent. So keep that in mind. The third thing that I take into consideration is my investor's level of experience. Is this their first flip? Is this their first investment property? Is this the first time that they're thinking of doing this? You're going to have investors that are going to freak out in the process of this is their first time. They under prepared, over budget, and they're freaking out about how they're going to be able to get out and get their money out, right? It's a big deal. They're investing a lot of cash, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and maybe they took out a second on their house in order to do this. And that's risky. That's scary. But I want to know, what's their level of experience? Do they, have they renovated houses before? Or are they just kind of handy and know their way around a screwdriver? That doesn't make you a contractor, right? So I want to know what level of experience you have. I want to make sure that you are informed when you're making your decisions and that you're making the best choices. But I'm always going to ask about what their level of experience is. Helping them with their due diligence. Like, again, how much information do they need in order to make an informed decision, and how can you help them with that? Have you analyzed the comps? Have you looked at rental rates? Have you looked at potential renovation costs? And does this project make sense? And then the last part is just managing their expectations. When it comes to finding the perfect property doesn't exist. Your investor is likely going to have very specific criteria of what they look for in a property. We call that in the investment world a buy box. A buy box means that we have certain parameters, and if the house fits these parameters, then we would invest in those types of houses. Your bigger investors, like your hedge funds managers, your corporate investors, we have those all over Middle Tennessee, and they exist in other parts of the country as well. Those people they have a buy box that is basically 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a 2-car garage in a neighborhood with either no HOA or no rental restrictions in the HOA. And it must be a minimum of like 1,200 square feet. It can't have in-ground pools. It can't have overhead power lines or sewer culverts. Some of them don't even allow septic systems. Some will allow some septic, but not certain others. You have to find out what your buy box is for that investor. But one of the things that I want you to know is that if you take on an investor client, they are going to run you all over town if you don't set some boundaries for yourself, which means you are going to look for properties on their behalf, and you will be happy to show them properties. But at some point, this investor is going to become a tire kicker because the numbers simply are not going to work when the interest rates are so high and the sales prices are so high already on the market, that the only way to keep from being dragged all over town is to find them something off market. Okay. The only way to keep them from dragging you all over town is to insert boundaries that say, I'll be happy to show this house to you. But remember, these people sometimes are not your A clients. Sometimes they're interested, but they're not committed. I want committed people, which means if I show you a house, you are running numbers today, and you're going to give me a decision today about whether or not this is right for you. If I show you a house, you're not going to think about it over the next 2 weeks or 2 months. You're not going to, I'm just interested in looking to see what's out on the market. Those are not my people. I want people who are seriously committed to finding a house. And again, they're not afraid of work, because here's the thing. If you're working with investors that just are looking for cosmetic repairs only to do, I want to slap some paint, I want to lay down some new flooring, I want to kind of clean up the trash and clean up the yard and get out. Those properties don't exist in my market anymore. They don't. I'm sorry. Most of the investors have already snatched them up, or somebody else who's trying to get into the market just to become a homeowner has snatched them up. But there are too many investors in my market right now that those properties that only need cosmetic renovation simply don't exist. The other problem is that most of your investors don't have the budget to actually buy in your market unless you find them something off market, right? Think about it this way. We get all kinds of leads for people that are looking for investment property, and their budget is $250,000. What can I buy in Nashville for $250,000? Nothing that's on the market. The only thing I can find would be a townhouse, which doesn't fit in some people's buy box. They want single family home. Or it's a property that literally I would be driving someone out of the neighborhood and practically taking it from them below value in order to get it at that price. $250,000 is just not a budget that works in our market right now. It's very hard to find a house under $300,000 that makes sense. So you have to be careful about managing your expectations with this investor, making sure they understand the properties that are out there. Even if they talk with wholesalers, they'll see most wholesalers don't have properties below $300,000 for them to pick up. And if they do, they're in pretty rough shape. They need to be torn down to the studs, right? Or they may be 6 dumpsters full of trash, which a dumpster is not a big deal, but you got to have crews in there with shovels to get it all out, right? So Let's talk about resources. So Bigger Pockets, you can go to biggerpockets.com. They have tons of free tools, resources, spreadsheets, guides, all kinds of stuff to working with investors. It is typipally for investors themselves, for them to join. There's a podcast that goes along with it as well. The same thing with RETipster. It's a resource for investors to be able to download spreadsheets, to download, little helpful guides, tips. There's probably I think there's a chat with RETipster as well. There's a National Association of Real Estate Investors called NREIA. And then there's a local group here in Middle Tennessee called REIN, which is the Real Estate Investors Network. You can join that for like $50 a year or something like that. I don't know what the exact cost is, but they have a Facebook group. They actually meet in person. People will talk about how they evaluate deals. People will talk about various subcontractors that they've hired or stay away from. People will talk about how to analyze projects, how to get money to source projects. There's all kinds of people in this real estate information network group. There's also women investors groups. If you're thinking of becoming an investor yourself, I will tell you the biggest tool and asset that you have is a real estate license. You have the ability to buy properties using your real estate license, using your commission as your down payment or as your closing costs. You have the ability to find and source projects better than people who don't have a real estate license. And then you can sell your own properties. You can rent your own property, not at Benchmark, but you can rent your own properties if you work somewhere else. Or you can use a property manager or whatever that is, or your husband can manage them, whatever, or whoever. But there are women's groups out there. And as I'll say again, the fastest way to long-term wealth is the acquisition of real estate, whether that's your portfolio or someone else's. But you have a tool that would help you buy properties, that would help you gain wealth, and that is your real estate license. But if you're going to be assisting other people in buying real estate, I want you to make sure that you know where the resources are that are available to them. If it is somebody who is just getting into investing, you may want to have them join the Real Estate Information Network. Oh, that's good. Claire, I didn't know that. She said that she's a member, obviously, and that Philip just sent an email for a partnership with a property management company, which is great because Benchmark doesn't allow us to do that. There is a book out there. It's back there, like with the whole millionaire real estate agent from Gary Keller. This one is the millionaire real estate investor. And so if you're interested in reading a book more about it, there's a book that you can check out. I do want to give you one warning, and this is just from an experience story. I worked with a developer a few years back who, smooth talking, handsome man, lots of money, or so I thought. He basically, and this is very common in the investment world, is that using other people's money to fund your projects. And that would be one of my questions up here when I said, when I'm trying to find out their level of experience and doing due diligence on them, if you're getting the bulk of my time, I'm going to know what I need to know about you, right? I'm going to investigate what you are, who you are, what you're doing. So this particular investor had a great vision. He came from California. His goal was to get in, construct new construction houses, and then turn around and sell them. So more on the development side than the rental side, but that's an investment too. So I want to talk about it real quick because development is a way that you can actually make a lot of money because you're taking raw land, building something out of it, and turning around and selling it. But the problem is that this gentleman used everybody else's funds. He didn't have his own money in the pot. And what he would do was leverage all of these investors. Hey, here's what the minimum contribution is from each person. Here's what we're expecting to turn around and sell these units for. And here's what your payout will be. If you loan us 50 grand or 100 grand, this is what we're going to turn around and pay you when we sell these units, right? So I want you to think about the risk that's involved in that. Number one, you're not guaranteed of what you're going to sell these units for. The market could tank tomorrow and the prices could come down. And so you're making promises on future gains that you may not be able to fulfill. That's risky, right? Investment is risky, period. But in terms of real estate being a risk, long-term hold, mid-term rentals, as long as you know where to put it and you can keep it occupied where you don't have vacancies, those are strong sources of income and strong sources of income for the future. They're actually pretty safe investments compared to the stock market or compared to cryptocurrency or all the other ways that people can invest their money. So I want you just to be, it is risky, but there are some risks that make it more risky than others. Again, using other people's money, because one of the things we didn't talk about is financing. So a lot of these investors, if they have their own money, that's great. If they have to use a hard money lender, let me explain what a hard money lender is real quick. A hard money lender, because let's talk about financing. How do these investors get their projects financed? So ideally, in a perfect world, you want an investor who has his own money. Okay, he has cash. Maybe he sold some properties somewhere else and he has cash to work with. Those are great. Those are the people I want, right? Have your own money. Or maybe you have one partner and the two of you together pooled your money. Totally fine. But if you don't have your own money, there are financing options out there where you could borrow money from what's called a hard money lender. A hard money lender is basically, you don't qualify for a typical loan, right? Maybe you have too much debt, or you don't even own this property yet, you're building it, something like that, or it's a short term, you're going to flip it. And so a lot of banks don't like to lend on short term ownership. They want you to live in it for a period of time. So hard money lenders typically charge double-digit interest rates. So 11, 12, 14, 15% interest. But they don't ask a lot of questions. They want to know kind of your history. They want you to have an LLC. They want you to, put a large percentage down, but they'll loan you the money, but it comes at a cost. It comes at a higher interest rate. So, and you have a short period of time. Some of these hard money lenders will only loan it to you for 6 months or maybe 3 months. And then you have to either refinance it or you have to pay off the loan. Well, for somebody who's flipping a house, they may be able to do all of that within the 6 months. They may be able to do all that within the year, whatever the timeline is. But what happens if your subcontractor dies or runs off with your money and you have to find a new one? Or what if, you run into a huge problem and the septic system has to be replaced and you can't even get a permit for that for 6 months? All of these things could happen, right? And borrowing money from a hard money lender is expensive. So that may completely blow your investor's budget. It may impact their ability to be able to cash out when the time frame comes. But they do exist for a reason, because they are short-term lenders at high interest rates that allow you to get in and get out without having to meet all the criteria for a normal loan. I've used hard money lenders on my own purchases before. So they're not all dangerous and awful. I just want you to know that they exist, but they are not for your mom and pop. This is their first flip, who's very risk aversive. They're not for the nervous Nellies, because again, you have a limited time typically, and the interest rate is higher. So your monthly payments are going to be higher. And for some people, if they don't have the cash, that could be a stressor for them. So again, I want to do my homework and make sure, where's your money coming from? Okay. This particular guy that I was giving you the instance of, the example of, he had money from all different people and he was involved in about 4 different projects at the time. And as predicted, when the market slows down or when the prices don't sell for what you think you are, your investors don't get paid when they're supposed to because you use that money for something else. He basically was guilty of fraud. You're right, Kim. You can do interest only on the hard money loans, which are great. But they still sometimes at 12% interest or 14% interest, it still can be higher. But interest only is still not bad. I agree with you. I'm not knocking hard money lenders. I just want you to understand what you're getting when you get hard money loans, is that they just are convenient. So they have terms that are not so favorable to the borrower sometimes, but sometimes they're perfect just to let you borrow the money. That's what you need, right? I bought my first house with hard money lending, because I didn't qualify at the time for a mortgage. So, but I appreciate you mentioned that for sure. So this guy, bottom line is that he ended up committing fraud because he didn't pay back his investors. It crumbled like a house of cards. Like, he ran out of money. Closings would happen. He didn't make as much as he thought he would. He couldn't pay the investors back that he borrowed the money from. And so now the guy is, basically convicted of fraud, and he is stolen millions of dollars from investors all over town. And if you mention his name in this town today, they would run, right? So I just want you to understand, who am I working with? Where did their money come from? Can I serve them? Am I knowledgeable enough to be able to help them? Can I earn their loyalty and their trust? Do they get the bulk of my time because of who they are and how many houses they're going to buy? Are they easy to work with? The other thing I will tell you about investors is they're very demanding. They want you to run numbers for them right now. They want you to go show this house right now because they do have to make decisions kind of quickly, right? So you need to make sure, is this what I want to do? Any questions on that information so far? Or comments? All right. Are you all scared now because I made it such a scary thing? Don't be scared. Okay. I promise you, I just want you to do your homework, learn from my mistakes, learn from my experiences. I don't want you to be scared of working with investors. I just want you to understand you need to gather as much information on the front end as possible so that you're better equipped to help them, so that do they get the bulk of my time, my A time, right? I did give you top 10 tips of working with investors. You need to understand the different types of investors and their specific needs. How do I treat an investor who is a buy and hold differently than somebody who's a flipper? And what are their needs? How are their needs different? Can I manage both of those? You should have a strong network. You should have a strong list of investors, of lenders, of contractors, of support people, of subcontractors, anybody that your person might need along the way. You should have a great vendor list to help them with that. You need to know the market forwards and backwards. What does something rent for, right? How do I find out what the rental rates are for midterm or short term? If I don't know that, where can I go to find that information, right? You need to have a network of people that do work with short-term investments and midterm investments and find out what those rental rates are, right? You need to be responsive. As I said, investors move quickly. They expect their agent to move quickly. You need to be able to answer questions about the property, provide information about the property, and show properties to them as quickly as possible. Remember, this is where you get run down because you're sick and tired of showing Jim, who's been watching HGTV for 2 months, you're tired of showing him properties that he's never going to buy, right? You got to put some boundaries in place. You got to make sure that you understand, hey, if I find you the right deal, are you going to be ready to pull the trigger? Will you be really ready to actually write an offer if I find you the right house, right? Are you able? Do you have the cash? No, I still got to work on my finances. Well, stop showing him houses. If he doesn't have any money and he is not pre-approved, stop it. Right? You put the boundaries in place to protect your time that you need to. Be honest and transparent. If you don't know something, you need to tell them, I don't know, but I will find out, right? Don't pretend like you know everything about commercial real estate or about investments. If you are learning along the way, you go get a resource. You come get me. You come get somebody who has worked with it before, but you be honest with them and tell them, I don't know, but I will find out. You also need to be honest with them about the drawbacks of why that property might be hard for you to sell. If they're looking at buying an ugly duckling that's ugly for everybody, they could fix it up with lipstick on the pig, but it's still sitting on top of the railroad tracks. It's still underneath the power lines. It's still next to the Union Mission, right? If that project raises red flags to you, you need to be honest with them and transparent with them about how that could impact their property, right? We are not transactional. We are not only focused on that one sale. We are trying to build clients for a lifetime. And you only do that by being transparent and honest with them, by pointing out things that could cost you the sale, but they're things that you would want them to know, right? And then understanding their financing options. Where's their money coming from? Are they using private mortgages? Or they have cash? You need to know that. You do need to know the numbers, analyze the potential properties, give them accurate projections about what things could cost or what they could be worth in the future. I try to be conservative with my investors when I give them, here's what I think you could sell it for fixed up, or if we add this basement, or if we add square footage, or if we renovate this way, this is what I think you could sell it for. I still am going to be pretty conservative on that range, because if I overinflate it and then the market shifts and slows down, I could have just cost my investor $50,000, right? That's a big deal. So I'm still going to be a little conservative on my ranges and try to err on the side of realistically, where could I sell this property? Realistically, what would someone be willing to pay for it after it's renovated and fixed up, right? Or what can I rent it for? I've had investor clients in the past where they're like, well, I know everything else is rented for $2,500, but I want to see if I can get 3. Bro, you're not going to get 3. I'm telling you that no one's going to pay $3,000 a month for this neighborhood. And my experience will tell you that. The data will show you that, right? So don't be afraid to have hard conversations with them that says that's not going to work. I find it very hard to believe you're going to be able to rent that for $3,000 sitting on the train tracks, right? Unless you have a train enthusiast, forget it. Be organized, keep track of all the details associated with each property and transaction. Be proactive. This is the biggest tip I can give to you, is you cannot wait for the property to come on the market. You have to be proactive in finding it and anticipating the questions that your investor is going to ask. So when I go show my investor properties, I've already run a rental analysis on this house. I already know what it can rent for before I get there, because I know he's going to ask me. I already know what the renovation would look like on it, because I already know he's going to ask me. I've already pulled the HOA rules to verify that you can rent in the neighborhood before I've gone and shown it, because I'm not going to waste my time on a property he can't rent, right? So be proactive and organized and think about, what do they need from me? Okay. The last part is just providing the value. You're going to give them the same professional service as you do all of your other clients. You're going to give them tips and resources and help and guidance. I am very blessed that one of my investors chooses beautiful finishes. He does not skimp out and cheap out on whatever was on the flash fire sale that he found at a yard sale. He actually picks things that look nice. Now, I have some other investors that are men that are colorblind and they got ugly tastes. So I tell them on the front end, please let me assist you in making selections, because I can't sell this ugly piece of crap that you put together because you got this for 12 cents tile and you got this wood over here out of some barn in Colioca for $8. But it's all warped and it's ugly. I need you to let me help you pick your finishes. I need you to let me help you pick things that appeal to the masses. I'm in the market every day. I know what buyers want. I know what buyers like. Please do not paint this thing this ugly color that you're thinking of painting it. Let me advise you. Let me guide you. Because remember, if they're going to be hiring you to sell it, you want to have influence over the selections that they pick. Unless they have a great eye, that's something I want to be involved in. And I've been very blessed that a couple of my investors are very good at it, but I've had some doozies that I learned the hard way, that I had to tell them, don't pick anything else out without asking me, because I can't sell it with the ugly tile you just picked. I can't sell it with the color you're thinking of painting it. I can't, you're making it harder for me to sell it, is what I should say. Or even down to the floor plan. Can I please look at the floor plan and make sure that the floor plan works for the masses, instead of this weird funky closet that you turned into a bedroom that's 5 by 8 because you wanted a third bedroom. 8 by 5 doesn't do anything for anybody unless you're Harry Potter living under the stairs. Okay. So look at the floor plans, advise them about, well, I just say things just to see if y'all are still awake. That's all. Advise them the best way that you can. Make sure that you have influence, because if you're going to be selling the house, you want to take away any barriers that could cost you the sale later. Okay. All right. Let me see what this chat says real quick. Where can we find data on rents? Great question, Kim. So your MLS is your best friend, right? Two things. One, in Realtor RPR, there's an investment tab that you can pay extra to get reports on investments in Realtor RPR. It will actually, some of them will give you cap rates and IRR rates in there. But if you're looking for regular everyday rental rates for long-term rentals, you can use your MLS to search for closed properties in the last year under rentals in this zip code or in that neighborhood, right? Just like you would run a comp analysis on a house that's for sale, you can do the same thing. You just change it to rentals. Short term in Airbnb, you're going to need a specialist for that. You're going to need to talk to other people who do midterm rentals or short term rentals and find out what's the going rate for a property that sleeps this many if you're doing Airbnb or short-term rentals. If you're doing midterm rentals, you're going to want to talk to somebody who has traveling nurses or has properties like that so you can see what the going rate is. Especially there are whole packages on Amazon that you can furnish an entire condo or an entire single family home pretty inexpensively for these furnished midterm rentals. I actually have one saved in a cart, so I can just save that cart to an investor and send that to them, and they can buy their whole interior furnishings. There's also companies that you can hire. There's a local gal here that one of my coaching clients works with that she actually does this as a business, helping short-term and midterm rental investors furnish their homes. And so she already has a package put together. The same thing. You just need to have resources like that. But you can always use your MLS to find rentals. You also can use, there's also something I think it's called Rentable, or I'll find the link for it. There's another kind of like a Realtor RPR that does a rental analysis that I will send for you. And just so that you have another resource of how to find out what something rents for. But I use the MLS every day, all day on past rental rates. Okay. I walked a new build 2-bedroom where 1 bedroom had no door and there was literally no way to hang one. Bedrooms do need doors. Buyers need doors too. I agree. And bathrooms without doors is a no-no. So these are the kind of things that I'm talking about, that if I saw the floor plan, if I walked through the project with them and they tell me exactly what they want to do, I can guide them. I love it when my investors call me and say, hey, I'm trying to decide between this and this, which is more valuable. So my investor will call me and say, should I do a 4th bedroom? Or should I make the 3rd bedroom larger? Or should I make the primary bathroom bigger and the primary bedroom closet bigger? Well, that's a no-brainer, right? For me, spend the money on the primary all day long versus putting in a 4th bedroom, because the 10 by 10 4th bedroom has no value to me, really. It's overall square footage and what's going to sell the property. But I love it when my investors trust me enough to ask me, which should I do? They don't just do it. They ask me my opinion, and then they listen to me. I don't claim to know everything, but I promise you I've been doing this long enough that I know what the buyers want. I know what's going to be a better sell. Okay. Any questions for me? Do you feel like I scared the hell out of you? Do you feel like you're a little bit more equipped to work with investors? Do you, have any comments, concerns? Do you want to just tell me good morning and I'm amazing? What would you like to tell me? Thanks, Aaron, for being here. Appreciate it.
I just want to thank you for doing the Zoom.
Sure.
I just jumped on. I saw your email. I jumped on. When I saw your email.
Sure.
But I recently did an open house, and an investor came through, and I really didn't know how to respond to him because I've never interacted with one at an open house before. But he basically just told me that he was walking through to see the home, but he wanted to connect with the owners because he never uses an agent to purchase homes. Yeah, he kind of threw me off. I've heard that before. I'm new to the industry, so I was just like, how would you respond to an investor that comes to, like an open house? So in that manner,
that happens often because they want to try to cut you out to save as much money as possible. right? And at the end of the day, what you want to, if you're just hosting the open house, it's not your listing. You just want to let them know, like, hey, I'm actually, I don't even have a relationship with this particular owner. I'm just hosting the open house. You're going to have to find that contact information on your own. Like, just don't be afraid to say that to them. But what I would try to say is, hey, I get that you want to save as much money as possible, but to be honest with you, and you have to show them that you bring a lot of value to the table and experience. Even if you're new, they don't need to know that. You can overcome lack of experience with confidence, period. Right? So you don't have to tell anybody that you're brand new. You have to show them that you're knowledgeable and competent. And then that will overcome the experience barrier, right? So what I would tell somebody like that is, I totally understand why you would want to try to buy without an agent, but really an agent can help you do a lot of the legwork that you're doing yourself. I can help you investigate the neighborhoods. I can help you investigate the rental rates. I can help you make selections. I can help you even finding a tenant. I can help you put it back on the market and selling it, right? So you want to insert all the things that you can help them with, and making sure that they understand. Some of them are still going to go, no, I don't want your help. I want to save the money. I've been doing this long enough. I don't need you. You just let those people go. Again, you want to work with the people that are worthy of your time. And one of the things that I want to make sure I teach you is how to evaluate the clients that you want to work with and make sure that the people you're giving your A time to are worthy of your time, that they respect you, that they, that they are on the same page as you, that they are working with you, not against you, that they actually value what you bring to the table as an agent. But that comes from us. That comes from us educating them about what we do and why we're here, and that we're looking out for them. There's some people who's never going to see it. No matter what glasses you put on, they're never going to see it. And if you know that and you recognize that they're never going to see it, you move on. Move on, because there's others. Okay? But if you're trying to cut you out, typically, and you'll see people that will come to an open house all the time, that they're really interested in the house, but they want to write the offer with the listing agent so that they can try to save money. That happens all the time. And our job is just to remind them, you know what? I totally understand why you want to go directly to the listing agent. Everybody wants to save some money, but have you thought about the fact that in attempting to save some money, you're actually doing more harm to yourself? You're giving up your negotiation. You're giving up your representation, someone to look out for your best interest, someone to help you navigate the process. Is it really worth saving $15,000 or $10,000, whatever the money is, to not have someone helping you navigate all of that without having someone negotiate on your behalf? Because that listing agent doesn't represent you. They represent the seller.
True.
Right.
And I did mention that part about the listing agent, but he was an older guy and he was just like, oh, well, I'll just do a quick claim deed. It's no big deal.
Right. Okay.
So he would be a representation of someone that I would move on, but I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah.
Just to get feedback, from you about it.
I love it. I love it. Anybody else? Any comments?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Comments, considerations, critiques, criticisms, or attaboys? We have one more session next week. I'm going to going once, going twice. I'm going to move on. Next week's session is value added services to wow your clients. So we're going to be talking about rolling out the red carpet, doing things a little differently than you normally do. Maybe really trying to impress your people and being proactively and how you're thinking about how you approach this client, how you treat them, little extras that you can do to wow them along the way. And so that will be our last session. It is next Monday at 10 o'clock, same bat time, same bat channel, right? Okay. So if nobody has anything else, I am so grateful that you guys join me every Monday. Thank you for setting aside the time. I hope these have been really helpful to you. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Okay? Go get them.